Welcome back to Our World. It's 1961 and is that time of year when summer turns to fall, or as sometimes happens, when summer confronts fall. Change is rarely a graceful operation. For instance, we face a crisis in Berlin, another in the South, another in Southeast Asia, not to mention the bomb. Still, our president, John Kennedy, points out that when written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, the other represents opportunity.
Two continents were aglow with brush fires that season. In Vietnam, the Viet Cong guerrillas were winning hearts and minds and villages from the Diem government. The United Nations had troops in the Congo fighting for the central government against the province of Katanga. White mercenaries fought for Katanga. Dag Hammarskjöld, the UN Secretary General, was killed in a plane crash in September on a mission to mediate that crisis. And then, of course, there was that wall we were up against in Berlin.
The wall is finished. The crisis is not. As summer ends and fall begins, the Soviet pressure on the Allied garrison increases. American troops in Germany are training for combat. In America, Kennedy asks for and gets a huge increase in the military budget. In August, he begins to call up the reserves. More than 200,000 reservists are ordered to report for combat training. Among the 76,000 called up for a year's active duty, Company B of the 101st Signal Battalion, Yonkers, New York.
You know, the Eisenhower years were over. I saw JFK coming in, new kid on the block in the international affairs, and he was being tested.
At Fort Devens, Massachusetts, they trained to fight in Europe and recorded on film. There's even a song written about the call-up.
But I'll go for God, country, and my baby. You know I have to go, and dear, I'll miss you so.
We didn't know where we were going and how long we were going to be away. So we got up there and then we found out that we might be shipped overseas. We had the training, we had good officers that trained us well, and we were ready to go. And if we had to go fight, we'd go fight.
Well, we knew we were going. There was a mission for us, and our equipment was in Germany, and we had 8 weeks, what they called intensified training at that time, to get them ready to go to Germany, and they were ready.
And when the Soviets begin to restrict Western access to East Berlin, it looks as if there might be a war to go to. On October 27th, American tanks move into place at Checkpoint Charlie, one of the crossings. For one day, U.S. and Soviet tanks face off. It is close, real close. But on the 28th, the tanks are withdrawn. That is one wall we've come up against, but not gone through. There are other walls. The Soviets support what they call wars of liberation. And all around the world, these wars pit American interests against Soviet interests. This is true in the Congo, in Laos, and in Vietnam. Walt Rostow helped Kennedy figure out what to do.
The Soviets felt this was an interval of historical opportunity, and they pushed very hard where opportunity offered.
In Southeast Asia, there's plenty of opportunity. We send advisors, money, and guns to Laos and Vietnam. We are not, we say, propping up dictators. We are, we say, fighting the expansion of communism. By October, the war isn't going well for South Vietnam, our side. Kennedy asked his military advisor, General Maxwell Taylor and Walt Rostow, to go to Vietnam to look hard and then give him some advice.
General Taylor was the head of the mission, I was his deputy, and we had a team, I forget how many, maybe 8, 10 men from different agencies. So when they hit the ground in Saigon, they were each, fanned out to write their reports. And some were political, some were economic, some were military, and so on.
In public, Kennedy has declared the war to be the business of the Vietnamese. In private, Kennedy tells his team the defense of South Vietnam is vital to the U.S.
We didn't go out until the president had decided that he was not going to see that area lost. From our point of view, it was an implementation mission, not a policy mission.
But the mission returns to offer new policy. They tell Kennedy he should send American combat troops to Vietnam. It is the first time this is suggested. Pierre Salinger, the president's press secretary.
But we did not send combat troops. And we never sent combat troops during the time that President Kennedy was in office. Why? Because President Kennedy believed that the United States had a responsibility to help South Vietnam, but not a responsibility to take up the warfare on behalf of South Vietnam.
Some young Americans ventured far from home that summer, armed only with knowledge and a sense of responsibility. They were called the Peace Corps. 23-year-old Dennis Galvin was one of the first to volunteer.
And I think that we can help. I think the Peace Corps can help in these countries.
My family was shocked. South Boston is a place where people are hardworking and God-fearing, and they don't worry about what happens in East Africa very much.
Throughout the summer, the volunteers trained for their new jobs. On August 28th, President Kennedy addressed the first group of 74 volunteers.
If you do well, then the Peace Corps will be developed, and more Americans will go abroad. And we'll find a greater and greater response to this idea of serving our country. Thank you.
I remember saying to Kennedy, I now know more about Tanganyika than I know about South Boston. And he laughed. I moved on. But that was a very important moment for me.
As that first group prepared to leave for Ghana and Tanganyika, Sergeant Shriver, the director of the Peace Corps, was worried.
For that whole project to be a failure would give Kennedy's political opponents an opportunity to say, ha, see what we told you? He's too young to have been elected president. He's too inexperienced to have been elected president. So I was worried, yes, I was worried. I wanted it to be a success, and it had to be an instantaneous success.
And that took more than knowledge and goodwill. It needed strong bodies. The volunteers were sent to survival school. Reverend William Sloan Coffin ran it like a boot camp.
Nobody likes to do it. I hate it myself, you know, but if you accept it and you do it, why, you know, there's value in it.
We had a rope course, and we had all kinds of exercises. But all designed to make people feel they couldn't do that. And then they did do it. And I would kind of make the point, you know, you did it physically, you're expected to do it intellectually, morally, spiritually. That's why you're in the Peace Corps.
Africa is beautiful, but many of its people spend their lives up against the walls of poverty and ignorance. The Peace Corps attacked those walls. Dennis Galvin did it by building roads in northern Tanganyika.
Putting 21 surveyors into that country probably tripled or at least doubled the number of surveyors, even in that very simple way of increasing the technical capacities of the country. That was an important contribution.
The Peace Corps was an instant success. Sergeant Shriver needn't have worried, and the volunteers had learned as much as they taught.
I mapped roads all over the province. We did a couple of jobs in town, built a couple of bridges. I built a water supply over there, and I've worked on a lot of jobs in a lot of places since then, but I'm as proud of that water supply as any job I've ever done anywhere.
There was this tiny hypocrisy. We sent people out to teach the American way, but we sent some of them to countries whose representatives to the United Nations weren't allowed to eat in American restaurants. Not white American restaurants. This, too, was the American way. Come back. Bring your ticket for the Freedom Ride, a bus tour to and through the wall separating white from black.
Our world will continue in a moment with Up Against the Wall, August, October, 1961.
Things come back to stores. Things come back to Sears.
Oh, I think you want to go that way. And it's a beautiful bottle.
But if you ever decide to return something to Sears, you don't have to give us a lengthy explanation.
I understand. Oh, don't worry. We'll take care of it.
All you have to say is, you're not satisfied. In some cases, you don't even have to say that.
Coors Light, hot dog, someone got a match. Sunglasses, radio, dive to make the catch. There's no place like this, I cannot tell a lie. Talking about America, the 4th of July. Come on and light up the 4th with Coors Light and Royal Oak. Light up your 4th of July.
Hey, there's no slowing down this 4th, so keep it moving with the Silver Bullet Coors Light and Royal Oak Charcoal. Stock up now at any Coors Light, and Royal Oak display.
Light up your 4th of July.
Sunday, a special presentation. Mr. Toad and his friends are looking for
travel, change, the whole excitement. The world is apple pie.
the family classic comes to life.
Glorious, oh, starring
The Wind in the Willows.
Sunday.
Welcome back to the late summer of 1961. In most of the South that season, this is what a black person found in a bus station. Despite the law of the land, old customs and in some cases state law prevailed. Enter the Freedom Riders, 7 blacks and 6 whites, who that spring challenged segregated facilities in several southern states. Mostly they were insulted or ignored, but in Alabama they ran into trouble and were beaten by mobs. And by the time they got to Mississippi, the original Freedom Riders had retired from the field. But hundreds of people, mostly young people, were taking their place, and in September would win their point. Now, to illustrate that victory, we're going to back up our time frame a little, the late spring of 1961, a year, incidentally, when some blacks seem to be doing just fine.
Jim Crow does at least seem mortally wounded. In many cities, integration has been peaceful as local police and local people uphold the law of the land. And the Marvelettes have the #1 song on the mostly white pop charts. Please, Mr. Postman is the biggest hit so far for a new company called Motown. Black comedians like Dick Gregory make black jokes for white audiences.
I mean, now, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't mind paying my income tax if I knew it was going to a friendly country. This is an angry black man.
It may be a friendly country, but to blacks, it's a damn slow one.
The white man, time is running out on him. Just like the tide. He's got to go.
That September, ABC broadcasts a documentary. It tells the black point of view. It's about impatience. It is not popular in some parts of the South. They boycott the sponsor, Bell and Howell. Louisiana prohibits its schools from buying their products. Last spring, a group of activists from CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, began to force a confrontation between the federal and state law. They called it a freedom ride. They call themselves Freedom Riders. James Farmer was the head of CORE.
We began the Freedom Rides as an attempt to break down one part of that segregated pattern. That part was segregation in interstate travel. We felt we were not practicing civil disobedience because the federal law was on our side.
The federal courts had ruled segregation was illegal in interstate travel, but they had not really challenged the state laws about it. Attorney General Robert Kennedy had asked the Interstate Commerce Commission for a ruling. Mississippi buses were segregated, and Mississippi's white people, most of them, were happy with the system just the way it was. Robert Nichols was the city prosecutor for Jackson, Mississippi, the man who enforced Jim Crow laws.
There was an old saying that a black man should stay in his place. And this means that he doesn't particularly interfere with the white man. And I think that was a feeling, undoubtedly, about it.
Mississippi Governor Ross Burnett had assured everybody that the Freedom Riders were a bunch of violent, crazy outsiders and had promised they would not be allowed to ruin things in Mississippi. Bernard Lafayette, a Freedom Rider.
It was a police state in the sense that people did not get out of line. Anything happened in Mississippi, it was ordered. So what we did was disturb this kind of peace and order, which was a negative order, because it was injustice, it was no oppression.
Governor Barnett and the city of Jackson vowed to, quote, keep the peace, which meant keeping segregation. Their method, jail the Freedom Riders. And they had done so, and they continued to do so. Among the riders, a group of students from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. They knew the risk. They had been warned. Diane Nash was one of the organizers for SNCC.
The students who boarded the buses were ready to die. Many of them, several of them, gave me sealed letters to be mailed in case they died, and some made out wills. So they made preparations for their deaths before they left.
We didn't have any definite plan because we really didn't know what was going to happen. We did decide that we were not going to use violent measures such as fire hoses and this sort of thing.
The strategy was to arrest us and then to stop the Freedom Rides.
The student strategy was to pack the jails. The threat of violence was always present.
You could almost feel it in the air. You could see the looks on people's faces that were standing on the curb and seeing these people parade by. You could hear the mutterings of the crowd. If the city had not exercised its duty, there would have been one riot after another in this town. And I mean the serious type where people would be either killed or hurt pretty bad.
Cordell Regan, 16, was one of the youngest jailed in Jackson.
The atmosphere with us was always upbeat. Nobody ever went crazy. Nobody ever said, let me out of here. We sang all the time, and it kept us going. I'll give you a little example of how that goes, okay? Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, Lord, set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind.
When you're scared, sing a song. It helps. The songs also helped recruit local blacks, who by now, in August, were helping to fill the jails. Bernard Lafayette set up an arrest factory. Volunteers would go down to the bus station, call the police, and Captain Ray would take it from there.
And we'd tell them how many people were coming, how many males, females. So just, like a factory, conveyor belt. And we would drive down, and they would walk into the white side of the bus station, and Captain Ray would be there, faithfully, because he'd already been informed.
Patrolman Jim Black was the man who took them to jail.
They came into the area. If the white went into the black area and was asked to leave by Captain Ray, they did not, then they were arrested. Same way with the blacks. If they went into the white waiting area and then he would ask them to leave, they did not leave, then he would arrest them.
More than 300 people were jailed that summer. Some were still there on September 22nd, when the Interstate Commerce Commission ruled that segregation on interstate buses and trains was illegal. The old signs came down. A new sign went up. The Freedom Riders had won.
Riding a bus is important. Voting is more important. The movement had begun to change direction in a way that would change everything else. They had taken the next step and begun to try to register black voters in the rural South. And there would be blood on the wall before they were done. Come back to the consequences of the confrontations of that time in 1961.
How does your AT&T long-distance call reach out with such clarity?
One of the things we can do is convert your voice into digital signals, blocking out virtually all interference, so every subtlety is preserved with a clarity that seems right next door.
Hello. Emma, I didn't know you were home yet.
I'm not. I'm still in paradise.
We're reaching further to bring your world closer. AT&T, the right choice.
Hello! Now that Ed has the hang of flying, this 4th of July we will be skyriding above the beaches and picnic places of America. So be sure to pick up a few bottles of the Bartles & James Original Premium Wine Cooler, or if you prefer, Ed's New Red. Uh-oh! So please keep your eye on the sky this 4th of July, and we thank you for your support.
Tonight, charges that the U.S. set out to ruin the economy of this South Pacific island to force it into a military alliance. Watch 2020 tonight.
Mel Brooks once put it this way: usually when a lot of men get together, it's called war. In August and September and October of 1961, a lot of men got together without getting to the war part. And a lot of men confronted each other without getting to the peace part. And then, of course, there was baseball. Here's the legacy of what all those men did and did not do.
When the night has come and the land is dark.
The Berlin Wall still stands, patrolled on one side by Allied soldiers who still remain, on the other side by East German border guards. The wall has done its job. The tide of refugees in 1961 has been dammed.
Oh, I won't be afraid.
Along Bernauer Strasse are memorials to those who died trying to escape. 74 people have been killed since the wall was built. Virtually nobody tries to escape anymore.
Stand by me.
Roger Maris died in 1985. His record of 61 home runs in a season still stands. The closest anyone came was Mickey Mantle, who hit 54 that same year. In 1986, for example, the leading home run hitter was Toronto's Jesse Barfield. He hit 40.
By the time of President Kennedy's death in 1963, there were 16,000 U.S. military advisors in Vietnam. By 1968, there were 500,000 American combat troops there.
No, I won't shed a tear just as long as you stand by me.
The Peace Corps still exists. Since 1961, more than 120,000 Americans have volunteered and served in 94 countries. In 1987, there are 5,500 volunteers in 62 countries.
Stand by me, stand by me.
In 1969, with Sesame Street, children's TV stepped up in class. Now there's even a children's network. One of its programs is a new version of Mr. Wizard.
Enemy attack.
Soon there will be toys that don't just look good on TV, but interact with TV.
You actually participate in the...
You can shoot the bad guys. Kill toy, kill.
The recent freedom marches in Cummings, Georgia, and the Klan activities that spawned them continue to show we don't all stand side by side, black and white together. Not yet.
Stand by me, stand by me.
Well, there it is, the way it was for a season of 1961. 3 of those 40 million children under 10 were mine. That summer, I was a night clerk at a primarily residential hotel in New York City, working 6 days a week, taking home $90. Like most of you, I was too busy, too absorbed in family concerns to have been a freedom rider or to have joined the Peace Corps. I regret that. I rejoice that I live in a place that gave me options.
Imagine how our world might look to a truly sane person. Take the Berlin Wall, take the bomb, take the public bathrooms, the ones with signs indicating that Americans, unlike most people, were divided into 3 sexes, male, female, or colored. On October 27, 1961, Simon & Schuster published a dangerously sane book about our world. It wasn't about the follies of 1961, but it could have been. It's sort of timeless, and it's one of only 2 books, the other's a dictionary, I consider important enough to own 2 copies of. A copy for work, a copy for home. Because to define sanity, I need the dictionary. But to keep mine, I need Catch-22. And so it goes. These things also happened during August, September, and October of 1961.
On October 23rd, the late Dag Hammarskjöld was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the only time it has ever been awarded posthumously.
Former Vice President Richard Nixon announced as a candidate for governor of California.
78 people died in the crash of a TWA plane in Hinsdale, Illinois. It was the worst commercial single-plane crash in U.S. history to that time.
CBS, impressed with the coverage of Hurricane Carla by its Houston affiliate, would hire one of the reporters, Dan Rather.
General Walter Beadle Smith, architect Eero Saarinen, Judge Learned Hand, and actress Marion Davies died.
On August 26th, a resolution was introduced into the Senate to award a gold medal to an actor, singer, composer, dancer, and friend to children everywhere. His name was Danny Kaye. For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
It's a scandal that rocked PTL.
Tomorrow morning, Jim and Tammy Baker talk about Jessica Hahn and allegations about his homosexuality.
Jim and Tammy Baker tomorrow on Good Morning America.
And ABC News Business Brief, now from New York, Sandra Van Oker.
Good evening. Unemployment dropped last month to its lowest level since 1979, but the government says the number of Americans working actually fell. The Fed says the nation's money supply rose in late June. NASA's awarded Grumman Aerospace a $1 billion contract to build a space station. A group of former Frontier Airlines employees sued People Express today for $52 million. The workers say People Express illegally diverted funds before Frontier went bankrupt. Egypt reversed itself today and said it will not increase oil production. On New York financial markets, the Dow gained 27 points. Interest on T-bills rose, gold lost 60 cents, and the dollar was higher. That's Business Brief. I'm Sandra Van Oker.